She didn't speak. Not when her father died. Not when the fire took everything. And not even when a man tried to take away the only thing left that still looked at her like she mattered. But a broken dog hurt her. And somehow so did God. This isn't just a story about a little girl and a wounded German shepherd. It's about scars that speak louder than words. And how a whisper of faith can echo louder than any scream. Stay with us, because what happened next wasn't just healing. It was holy. Maplewood, Montana, was a town carved from pine and resilience. In late autumn, its narrow streets wound through a golden landscape that was rapidly fading into the muted gray of oncoming winter. The air was crisp and dry, the kind that made your breath fog in the morning and your skin tighten beneath wool. The sky hung low and moody over the mountains, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. It was the kind of place where news traveled faster than the wind, and the closing of Thompson's dairy farm, the largest employer in the area, had left the entire community aching with uncertainty. Ellie Carter stood just outside the creaky fence of the Maplewood County Fairgrounds, her gloved fingers gripping a dented coffee tin like it was a treasure chest. She was small for 10, with freckles dotting her pale cheeks and a long, tangled ponytail the color of straw. Her eyes, wide and gray-blue, carried the seriousness of someone much older. Ellie wasn't one for loud games or glitter pens. She preferred quiet corners, dusty books, and watching birds from her bedroom window. Since her father passed nearly 2 years ago, she'd grown even more inward, anchoring herself to routines, to her mother's voice humming through the hallway, and to the contents of this tin she now carried. The tin itself was once her father's, back when Robert Carter was the most respected dog trainer in 3 counties. He was a lean man with a laugh that cracked like firewood and hands that smelled like cedar and dog fur. His sudden passing from a heart attack had gutted the household, leaving a void that neither Ellie nor her mother had yet filled. Robert had planned to open a community-based training program for service dogs before fate stole him away. Ellie glanced over at her mother, Anna Carter, who was sitting behind the wheel of their rust-flecked station wagon. Anna was in her early 40s, tall and wiry, her frame lean from years of standing long hours. She had fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 2 years ago, and her auburn hair was pulled into a tight bun. These days, she worked double shifts at the Maplewood General Hospital as a nurse and studied late into the night for her nursing degree. Practical and unsentimental, Anna loved her daughter fiercely, though grief had taught her to shield it behind measured words and tired eyes. She didn't believe in whimsy, not anymore. "You remember the rules?" Anna asked through the rolled-down window, her voice hoarse with fatigue. Ellie nodded, clutching the tin closer. "Yes. Stay with Mrs. Marlene's grandson at the stand. Don't wander. Just looking." "Just looking," Anna repeated, eyes narrowing. "And I'm picking you up at noon sharp." "Yes, ma'am." With that, Ellie slipped into the fairgrounds. She passed booths that were still being set up, farmers arranging bushels of apples, knitters unfolding blankets of soft wool, and kids practicing for the pie-eating contest. But Ellie moved with purpose toward the far end, where the temporary pens were lined up like a quiet confession. This was the auction area. The animals were restless in the crisp morning air, horses snorting plumes of fog, goats bleating for hay, and dogs pacing within fenced enclosures. Ellie scanned the pens, her heartbeat quickening. A few of the dogs barked or wagged their tails at passers-by, eager Labradors, intelligent border collies, even a sleepy-eyed retriever. But she was looking for something else. Mrs. Marlene, her neighbor and longtime friend of her father's, had mentioned it days ago while dropping off soup. A lot of the dogs from a recently closed service dog training facility were going to be auctioned off, she'd said, and not all of them were in great shape. The thought had lodged in Ellie's heart like a thorn. She found the dog last. He was in a small pen set apart from the rest, under a shadowed corner of the auction tent. He wasn't moving. His coat, once no doubt thick and proud, hung in tufts, revealing patches of raw skin. One ear stood erect, the other drooped as if tired. And his ribs, Ellie counted 5 with ease. But it was his eyes that stilled her, deep amber, alert yet withdrawn, carrying a sorrow too profound for a creature that couldn't speak. A volunteer came by, a young man in a yellow windbreaker, placing fresh water in the bowl. "That's lot 48, he said, glancing at Ellie. "German Shepherd, 3 years old. Name Shadow. Returned twice." They say he's got issues, seizures maybe. No one really knows. He's not expected to go for much. Ellie nodded, barely hearing. Shadow's eyes met hers through the fencing. There was a flicker of something, recognition, hope. She reached through the bars, palm up. The dog didn't move. The auction began promptly at 10. Ellie stood near the back, her tin clutched tight to her chest. The air smelled of sawdust and animal musk, and the auctioneer's voice boomed from a speaker that crackled with static. Dogs were called out, paraded briefly, and sold, some for hundreds of dollars, others for less. Ellie's heart dropped with each transaction. Then, Lot 48, male German Shepherd, possible health issues. Let's start the bidding at 100. Silence. 75. A cough. Shuffling feet. 50. Ellie raised her hand. 42, she said, voice clear despite the quiver. Heads turned. The auctioneer blinked. Do I hear 45? Silence. Sold. To the young lady in the back. Ellie's world shifted. The tin was lighter now. Shadow was hers. The wind that rolled over Maplewood that afternoon carried a sharper edge, hinting at the snow that would soon fall from the mountain ridges. Ellie Carter sat in the back seat of the station wagon, her hands gripping the frayed handle of Shadow's leash as her new dog lay motionless on an old quilt beside her. The smell of hay and antiseptic still clung to his fur. His breathing was shallow, his head unmoving except for the occasional twitch of his ear when Ellie whispered his name. Shadow's body, though large in frame, had the gauntness of something forgotten, skin stretched thin over bones, muscles wasted from disuse. His dull coat barely hinted at the noble form he must have once had. Anna Carter gripped the steering wheel tightly. Her lips were pressed in a line so firm they looked carved from granite. The silence in the car was not a quiet one, but one humming with unspoken words. She was tired, always tired, not just from double shifts and night classes, but from the weight of keeping everything from unraveling. When her husband Robert died, Anna didn't cry. She folded the flag they gave her at the funeral and returned to work the next day. Her grief had been tucked deep beneath scrubs and study guides, transformed into duty and schedules. She loved Ellie fiercely, but loving didn't mean indulging. They reached the house, a modest two-bedroom tucked against a tree line, with shutters in need of paint and gutters long surrendered to rust. Ellie helped Shadow out of the car, letting him lean against her. Each step he took was a waver between collapse and instinctual drive. His paws were too big for his frame now, legs trembling beneath his weight. Still, he followed Ellie inside, through the narrow hallway that still bore scuff marks from Robert's work boots. Anna trailed behind, arms crossed. He needs a vet, Ellie. Soon. I don't think he's stable. I know, Ellie said, without looking up. I'll figure it out. Figure it out? Anna's voice rose, then softened as she caught herself. Baby, vet bills aren't pennies. They're hundreds, sometimes more. And we've still got the mortgage. Ellie kept moving, leading Shadow to a corner of the living room they had once called the reading nook. Now she laid down a folded blanket and placed a small water bowl beside it. I'll ask Mrs. Marlene, Ellie said quietly. Anna ran a hand over her face. That woman is generous, but she's not a bank. Shadow curled into the blanket with a faint groan. His eyes followed Ellie as she crouched beside him, whispering soft encouragements. Anna watched the way her daughter's hand lingered on the dog's bony shoulder and saw something in her posture she hadn't seen in months. Purpose. The next morning, Ellie skipped her usual cereal. Instead, she boiled chicken and scrambled 2 eggs. Shadow watched, but didn't lift his head. She brought the bowl close, whispered, "Come on, boy," but the dog barely blinked. She offered a piece by hand. He sniffed, then turned away. His breath rattled, and she noticed a twitch in his hind leg, a tiny, repeated spasm. School that day passed in a blur. Ellie's mind wasn't in long division or spelling drills. It was home with Shadow. At recess, she sat on the steps with her knees to her chest until someone's voice pulled her back. Hey, you okay? It was Mason Lee, a boy in her class with a mop of dark curls and paint-stained fingers. Mason was quiet like her, but for different reasons. His older brother had left town a year ago after a car accident that fractured more than bones. Since then, Mason had stopped talking much, but he watched things. He was always drawing. Birds, buildings, sometimes classmates without them knowing. Ellie nodded. Just tired. Mason didn't push. He sat beside her, and offered half a granola bar. They didn't say anything more, but it was the first time Ellie didn't feel entirely alone at school. Back home, Shadow hadn't eaten. His water bowl remained full. Ellie's worry grew heavier. That evening, she knocked on Mrs. Marlene's door. The old woman, tall and silver-haired, opened with a cardigan slung over her shoulders and a scarf wrapped like armor around her neck. "He's not eating," Ellie blurted. Mrs. Marlene raised an eyebrow, then nodded. "Bring him by tomorrow. I've still got my old exam table in the shed. We'll take a look." Ellie's gratitude overflowed into a hug that startled the older woman, who awkwardly patted her back. The following day, with Anna's reluctant approval, Ellie led Shadow to Mrs. Marlene's converted garden shed. The space smelled of lavender and alcohol wipes. Cabinets lined the wall, a sink stood in one corner, and in the middle was a worn examination table with a step stool. Mrs. Marlene examined Shadow with gentle hands. "He's dehydrated, underweight, and there's something odd about his reflexes," she murmured. "Might be neurological. Did they say anything at the auction?" Ellie shook her head. "Only that he had issues. Maybe seizures." The older woman clicked her tongue. "Could be. Or something else entirely. His eyes are clear, though. That's good. You've got your work cut out for you." Back at home, the air between Anna and Ellie had thickened again. Anna had started sleeping on the couch with her textbooks, too exhausted to make it to bed. She rarely looked at Shadow, though her eyes would flick toward him when she thought Ellie wasn't watching. Her voice softened, imperceptibly, when she asked, "He eat anything today?" "No," Ellie would answer. But he sniffed the broth. On the third day, Ellie found herself crying into Shadow's fur, whispering, "Please don't give up on me." She clutched the tin box that now held only 2 quarters, a button, and a movie ticket stub her dad had once given her. That night, Anna stood in the doorway watching Ellie sleep beside the dog. She thought of the bills stacked on the counter, the voicemail from the electric company, the price tag on Shadow's growing needs. She thought of Robert, how he'd been the only one who could calm Ellie's colic as a baby, how he believed that every dog had a purpose if you just listened hard enough. Anna sighed, turned off the light, and let them sleep. The morning sun filtered weakly through the frost-laced windows of the Carter house, casting a pale gold hue over the floorboards where Shadow lay curled in the corner. Ellie sat beside him, legs crossed, hands wrapped tightly around a chipped mug of warm broth. Steam curled upward but didn't entice the German shepherd, who hadn't touched food in over 2 days. His breathing was slow but steady, his ears occasionally twitching at distant sounds, a car passing, a bird chirping, but his eyes, those deep amber wells of quiet sorrow, remained fixed on the floor. Ellie leaned closer, whispering softly, "You've got to try something. Just a little bite, Shadow. Please." She nudged the bowl again, but he didn't move. The scent of boiled chicken and broth wafted through the air, but there was no reaction, no interest, not even a glance. Anna stood in the kitchen, observing from the doorway, her arms folded. Her eyes lingered on her daughter more than the dog. She saw how Ellie's small frame seemed to slump more each day, how her hands moved with a gentleness and desperation far beyond her years. Anna wanted to step in, to take the bowl, to say it was enough. But something held her back. Maybe it was the echo of Robert in Ellie's eyes. Maybe it was guilt. That afternoon, Ellie bundled up and returned to Mrs. Marlene's home next door. The older woman welcomed her inside with a nod, her stiff joints clicking as she moved through the narrow hallway of her cottage. Mrs. Marlene was in her early 70s, her face weathered like river stone but kind. She wore 2 cardigans even inside, and always smelled faintly of peppermint and dog shampoo. Her house was cluttered but warm, porcelain dogs on shelves, faded photos of her late husband and their long-gone beagle, Rufus. "He's still not eating," Ellie said, her voice barely audible. "He just looks like he's waiting for something that's not going to happen." Mrs. Marlene paused, then motioned for Ellie to follow her into a small back room that once served as a veterinary space. "Some dogs aren't just waiting," she said, lifting a cardboard box labeled Robert Carter and placing it on the work table. "Some of them are trained not to respond unless they're given a specific signal. Service dogs especially." Ellie's heart skipped. "You think that's what's wrong with Shadow?" "Could be." She opened the box, revealing several notebooks and laminated sheets, most written in Robert's blocky handwriting. These are copies your dad gave me years ago when he was helping with the facility in Pine Hollow. That's where Shadow came from, isn't it? Ellie nodded. That's what the auction guy said. Marlene flipped through the pages, pulling out a sheet titled Handler-Specific Commands, Non-Standard Protocols. She tapped a line halfway down. Behavioral lock. Some dogs were taught to only eat, sleep, or perform tasks with a code word, usually to prevent unauthorized engagement or protect their training schedule. Ellie stared at the sheet, reading and rereading the notes. So, maybe Shadow's waiting for someone to tell him it's okay. But not with just any word. The right one. That's the theory. Could take trial and error. And patience. Lots of it. Back at home, Ellie sat cross-legged on the floor beside Shadow again. The notebook lay open next to her. Take food, she said. Nothing. Okay, Shadow. Eat. Chow time. Dinner. She tried combinations, words she imagined someone might have used. Meal. Bite. Chew. Hours passed. The sun sank behind the pine trees. Anna popped her head in from the kitchen. Ellie, don't stay up too late. I won't, she lied. Just as she was about to give up, Ellie recalled a note from the bottom of a page. Unique phrasing preferred to discourage strangers. Her father had underlined it twice. She hesitated. Shadow, nourish. Nothing. She whispered it again, slower. Shadow. Nourish. The dog's ear twitched. A subtle flick, but enough. Ellie held her breath, heart pounding. Nourish, she repeated. Shadow turned his head, slowly, his eyes rising to meet hers. She nudged the bowl forward. Shadow dragged himself an inch closer. His tongue flicked over his nose. Then, hesitantly, he leaned toward the bowl and took a single piece of chicken between his teeth. Anna, watching from the hallway unnoticed, covered her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, not just from relief, but from the memory of Robert using that same word in training videos. Nourish, he'd say, gently, like it was sacred. Shadow chewed slowly, his eyes never leaving Ellie. It worked, she whispered, barely believing it herself. The next morning, Shadow managed 3 pieces of boiled egg and a sip of broth. Not much, but more than nothing. Ellie made notes in a fresh spiral notebook she titled Shadow's Comeback. She recorded every word that prompted a response, every movement he made. She wrote down the time he blinked twice when she called his name, and how he turned his head toward the sound of her zipper. At school, she felt lighter, though she still kept mostly to herself. During art class, Mason Lee slid a sketch across the table. It was a pencil drawing of Shadow curled at Ellie's feet, eyes half closed, but alert. You're really good, Ellie murmured. Mason shrugged. He looked like he wanted to say something. That night, Ellie showed the drawing to Shadow. He studied it, then placed his head in her lap. The bond between them was growing, subtle but undeniable. The house felt different now. Not warmer exactly. Maplewood's biting autumn chill still crept through the window panes each evening, but quieter, calmer, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. The heavy silence that once cloaked the Carter home had begun to shift into something gentler, softer, all because of a single word, nourish. Shadow had responded to it like a door unlocking in his mind. Since then, he'd started to eat small amounts, first cautiously, then with a slow-building appetite that reflected the same hesitant trust glowing in his amber eyes. Anna Carter stood at the stove that morning, preparing a pot of oatmeal. She didn't turn when she heard Ellie padding softly into the kitchen in her socks, Shadow at her heels, but her lips twitched into a tired smile. She added a splash of milk and stirred slowly. He ate more this morning, Ellie said, opening the fridge and pulling out the leftover chicken she had saved. 3 bites. No coaxing this time. Anna glanced sideways. You're keeping track? In a notebook. Just like Dad did. Ellie slid a piece of chicken into a ceramic bowl and placed it gently on the floor. Shadow approached, sniffed, and with a slow, practiced motion, began to eat. Anna leaned against the counter, arms crossed. He knows more than he lets on. Ellie nodded. I think Dad trained dogs like him. The ones that need extra time. A pause. I found one of his training manuals in the attic, Anna said finally. I didn't know what to do with it. Figured it'd hurt more than help. Ellie's head tilted. Can we look at it? Later that afternoon, after school and before Anna's night shift, they pulled down a battered cardboard box from the attic crawlspace. Dust curled through the air as they opened it. Inside were spiral-bound notebooks, a tattered binder labeled Service Protocols, and a small leather folder that smelled like cedar and dog fur. Ellie's fingers trembled slightly as she lifted out a notebook. Her father's handwriting greeted her in bold, confident strokes, block letters with arrows, notes in margins, and circled keywords. Anna settled cross-legged on the living room carpet, her long limbs folding stiffly. She hadn't sat like that in years. Ellie sat opposite her, shadow lying between them, his head on his paws, but eyes alert. "This one's about early command imprinting," Ellie said, flipping through a few pages. "He used unique phrases so the dog wouldn't respond to strangers. That's why Nourish worked." Anna picked up a different binder. "Here. This section talks about bonding triggers, eye contact, scent, repetition. Your dad believed dogs knew us better than we knew ourselves." For the first time in many months, they read together, not about sickness, not about bills, but about possibility. "Look at this," Anna said, pointing to a paragraph. "Advanced service dogs may reject unfamiliar handlers entirely if the training bond is broken prematurely." "You think that's why Shadow wouldn't eat?" "He was waiting for someone familiar," Ellie said. "Or waiting for a signal that he was safe again." Anna looked at her daughter then. And maybe he got it. As the light faded outside, the living room glowed with the amber warmth of the reading lamp. For a moment, the air felt like it used to, before grief, before silence. Shadow shifted closer to Ellie's knee. That night, Anna called in late to her shift for the first time in over a year. Not to abandon work, but to take another hour, just one, to sit beside her daughter and a dog who had begun, slowly, to return to himself. The wind rustled through the pines outside the Carter home, carrying the scent of firewood and the distant hush of snow yet to fall. Inside, Ellie sat at the dining table beneath a dim brass chandelier. Notebooks, manuals, and dog training sheets sprawled around her like puzzle pieces. Shadow lay beside her chair, his breathing steady, his eyes more aware with each passing day. He now followed Ellie from room to room, pausing only when she paused, resting only when she sat. The transformation was slow but undeniable. She flipped to the back of one of her father's older binders and found a section marked Phase 3, Medical Response Canines. The pages were filled with diagrams and case notes, but one line stood out, underlined in red ink and circled twice. Preictal sensitivity observed in 7 out of 10 subjects. Re. GS number 2318 early indicators before seizure onset. Ellie glanced down at Shadow. GS stood for German Shepherd. Could number 2318 have been Shadow? The thought stayed with her through the morning. At school, during science class, her attention drifted, and she found herself sketching Shadow's silhouette in the margin of her worksheet. Later, in the lunchroom, she sat across from Liam Grady, a quiet boy with a round face, wiry red hair, and the habit of picking at his sleeves. He rarely spoke to anyone, and most of the time he sat alone. But today, he glanced at the notebook in her hands. "Is that your dog?" he asked, his voice barely louder than a whisper. Ellie looked up, surprised. "Yeah. His name's Shadow. My mom said you rescued him." Liam shifted uncomfortably. "She said he looks scary, but I think he looks calm." "He's getting better," Ellie said. "He was trained for something before. My dad used to work with dogs like him." Liam hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "Do you think he knows when people are not okay?" Ellie frowned. "What do you mean?" He tapped his chest, then his head. "Like, before you get that feeling where everything goes blank and loud, and you want to hide under the table." Ellie stared at him. "Do you get that a lot?" Liam nodded. "Since the accident. My mom calls them episodes. She makes me wear a wrist monitor now, but I still hate going outside." An idea sparked in Ellie's mind. "Do you want to meet Shadow?" Liam's eyes widened, both in hope and fear. "Would he bite?" "Not unless you're a squirrel," Ellie smiled. That afternoon, Ellie sat with Anna and explained what she had found in the binder, the file labeled number 2318, and what Liam had told her at lunch. Anna listened quietly, fingers curled around her coffee mug. "Dad worked with Pine Hollow, right?" Ellie asked. Anna nodded slowly. "Yes. He helped develop their early training modules, especially for seizure-alert dogs. That was his last consulting project. What if Shadow was one of them? What if he remembers?" "Ellie, even if that's true, it's a big step from remembering a command to detecting a medical event. These programs took years to train a dog, but he already knows things," Ellie pressed. "He senses when I'm upset." And he always lays close when I cry. Anna was silent for a moment. If you're serious about this, we need someone to observe. Someone who understands what to look for. Ellie bit her lip. What about Dr. Kimball? Dr. Isaac Kimball had been Maplewood's resident vet for nearly 20 years. A tall, silver-haired man in his late 50s, he wore corduroy jackets and carried a constant smell of hay and antiseptic. He had treated every pet in town at least once and was known for speaking in short, matter-of-fact sentences. Though gruff, he respected Ellie's father and still referred to Robert as the best instinct trainer I've ever known. The next morning, Anna called his clinic, and by afternoon, they drove Shadow down the gravel road to the small wooden building with a weathered sign reading Maplewood Veterinary and Farm Animal Services. Dr. Kimball greeted them in the exam room, arms folded. This the shepherd everyone's talking about. Ellie nodded. Shadow sat quietly beside her, posture alert. Kimball crouched to eye level, watching the dog. Eyes clear, posture guarded but aware. Good bond with the girl. He looked up. What's your theory? Ellie explained everything. About the manual, the code name, Shadow's refusal to respond until the right command, and Liam's episodes. Kimball scratched his chin. Dogs like this are rare. If he was trained for seizure response, you might start seeing behavior like persistent staring, nudging, or anxious pacing when someone's about to experience an episode. But be cautious, don't push him too fast. We won't, Anna said, then glanced at Ellie. But we'd like to give him the chance. Over the next week, Ellie began working with Shadow in small increments. She used techniques from her father's manual, focusing on attention recall, object retrieval, and emotional stabilization cues. Shadow thrived in the structure, responding quickly to hand signals and commands like brace and focus. Ellie began keeping logs, timestamps, context, behavior patterns, modeled after Robert's own meticulous notes. On Thursday afternoon, Liam's mom, Angela, brought him over for a short visit. Angela Grady was a petite woman in her late 30s, with anxious green eyes and a habit of wringing her hands. Her son clung to her side until Shadow appeared at the door, tail down, ears slightly perked. Liam tensed. Shadow froze, then slowly approached, stopping just short of touching. He's just saying hi, Ellie said gently. Liam reached out, and to everyone's surprise, Shadow stepped forward and nuzzled his hand. He's warm, Liam murmured. The visit lasted 20 minutes. Shadow never left Liam's side. When the boy grew overwhelmed and started rocking slightly, the dog sat beside him, his body pressed against Liam's leg. Angela wiped her eyes silently as she watched. That night, Ellie wrote in her log. Shadow recognized Liam's distress before any of us did. No commands, no cues. He just knew. It was a crisp Saturday morning in Maplewood. The trees, already stripped of most of their leaves, cast long, spindly shadows across the frosted pavement. Ellie was sitting on the back porch, her breath misting in the chilly air, a mug of hot cocoa cradled in her hands. Shadow lay at her feet, head resting on his paws, his eyes half closed but alert. Inside, Anna had just finished folding laundry, humming softly to an old Patsy Cline song playing from the radio in the kitchen. Ellie looked up as the sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the morning calm. A sleek black SUV pulled into their modest driveway, a stark contrast to the faded pickup trucks and second-hand sedans typical in the neighborhood. The engine cut off, and the driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a pressed charcoal suit far too formal for the rural setting. His coat was long, almost brushing his polished shoes, and his dark hair was combed back meticulously. He moved with purpose, not arrogance, but with the kind of confidence that came from always getting what he wanted. As he approached, Ellie instinctively placed a hand on Shadow's collar. The dog sat up straight, muscles subtly tensing. Anna came to the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. "Can I help you?" she asked, the smile on her lips polite but guarded. The man nodded once. "Good morning. I'm Dr. Dalton Rivers. I represent the Belmont Canine Research Institute in Seattle. I believe you have something that belongs to us." Ellie stiffened. Anna stepped forward, frowning. "We're not interested in donations, sir." Dr. Rivers offered a patient smile. "I'm not here for donations, Mrs. Carter. I'm here about the dog." He glanced down at Shadow, who hadn't moved. That German Shepherd was trained through a joint program between Belmont and the Pine Hollow facility. He's registered under a discontinued protocol, Series GS 2318. That makes him institutional property, technically. Ellie stood up. He was at an auction. Abandoned. I bought him fair and square. Yes, and I imagine you paid. What? $50. His voice remained calm. I'm prepared to offer 10,000. Anna's eyes widened, but her expression hardened. Why now? Dr. Rivers looked between them, folding his hands behind his back. The program that trained Shadow was suspended due to management issues. But recent developments have renewed interest in reviving it. Dogs like him, especially with his rare preictal sensitivity, are difficult to replicate. We want to bring him back, provide him with full medical care, better facilities, and put him to use where he can help the most. He is helping, Ellie snapped. Right here, with kids like Liam. The name seemed to make Rivers pause. Liam Grady? You know him? Anna asked. I'm aware of his case, Rivers said. But our goal is broader. With the right tools, Shadow could serve dozens, even hundreds of patients. Anna glanced down at Shadow. He barely survived when he was with you. Rivers adjusted the cuffs of his shirt. That was regrettable. Mistakes were made. But we've learned. I'm offering a second chance. For all of us. Ellie stepped forward. He's not a tool. He's family. There was silence. Dr. Rivers sighed. Very well. I'll give you time to reconsider. My number's on this card. He placed a black business card on the porch railing, then walked back to his car. Before stepping inside, he looked back at Shadow. He still remembers his purpose. That's more than most dogs ever do. As the SUV pulled away, Ellie knelt beside Shadow, running a hand along his back. His tail didn't wag, but his eyes met hers with something steady and sure. Later that day, Liam came by. Angela watched from the sidewalk as her son walked slowly toward the Carter home, his hands buried in the pockets of a too-large hoodie. Shadow trotted out to meet him, tail raised slightly. Hi, boy, Liam whispered, kneeling. Shadow pressed his forehead gently against the boy's chest. Angela came closer. He's sleeping better, she told Anna quietly. The night terrors are less frequent. Anna nodded. He's doing the work. Angela looked at her. Or maybe the dog is. Inside, Ellie had begun building a calendar titled Shadow's Circle. She marked sessions with Liam on Mondays and Thursdays. Another girl named Rosie, who had speech delay, was scheduled for Saturday mornings. And an autistic boy named Trevor was set to visit next week with his parents. Shadow was becoming more than a companion. He was a quiet force anchoring small hearts. That evening, Anna and Ellie sat on the porch again, watching the horizon fade from gold to gray. Do you think he'll come back? Ellie asked. Maybe. What if he doesn't give up? Anna looked at her daughter. Then neither will we. The first sign something was wrong came not from the flicker of flame, but from Shadow's growl. It was low, guttural, not the sound he made when someone knocked at the door or when a squirrel rustled through the hedges. This was deeper, ancient. Ellie had been asleep, curled under her quilt with one arm draped over her notebook. Shadow, who rarely left her side at night, had been pacing the hallway, his nails tapping nervously against the wooden floor. It was nearly midnight in Maplewood. The wind had picked up, howling through the pine trees that bordered the town like silent sentries. Ellie's window rattled in its frame, and when she sat up, confused, she smelled it, smoke. She jolted awake. Shadow barked sharply now, alerting Anna, who rushed down the hallway, robe flapping behind her. Flames reflected in the window like distant orange ghosts. Ellie ran to the porch. The small training shed behind their house, the one that once belonged to her father, filled with his journals, training collars, and equipment, was ablaze. No, Ellie cried, already halfway down the back steps before Anna could stop her. Ellie, get back here, Anna shouted. But Ellie's mind was already in the fire. That shed held her father's final work, the only tangible link to his methods, his handwriting, his hopes for dogs like Shadow. She couldn't let it go. Shadow was at her heels as she bolted across the lawn, barefoot and reckless. The heat hit her as she reached the door. She pulled the hem of her pajama sleeve over her hand and pushed. The wood was scalding. Inside, smoke curled around the ceiling, choking the air. Dad's binders, she whispered, eyes darting across the shelves. Shadow darted ahead of her, weaving through the narrow aisles, his body low and tense. He paused near a low cabinet and barked twice. Ellie followed, coughing now. She yanked open the door, grabbing the thick stack of papers inside. The air grew darker, hotter. A beam above groaned. Shadow circled her feet once, then nudged her hard toward the door. The world blurred in heat and panic. Ellie stumbled, eyes watering. She couldn't see the exit. But Shadow barked again, 3 sharp, rhythmic calls. She followed the sound, papers clutched to her chest, stumbling into the cold night air just as the flames burst through the side wall behind her. Anna ran forward, throwing her arms around her daughter. Shadow collapsed beside them, panting heavily, his flanks heaving. His coat was singed, and the pads of his paws were red from heat exposure. The fire trucks arrived minutes later, sirens splitting the silence. Firefighter Crew Chief Randy Tolman, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s with a silver-streaked beard and a calm demeanor, led his crew in dousing the fire. Anna, wrapped in a blanket, held Ellie close as they watched the structure fall in on itself. Dr. Kimball arrived shortly after, summoned by Anna's panic call. He examined Shadow's paws and soot-covered muzzle with careful hands. He's exhausted, but he'll recover. He let her out. Ellie nodded. He didn't even think twice. Later that morning, as the sun rose dull and gray behind the trees, Sheriff Dean Miller arrived. A tall, weathered man with crow's feet etched into his tanned skin, Miller had known the Carters for years. He took off his hat as he approached. "We pulled footage from the gas station across the road," he said, flipping open a small notebook. "Your security camera out back was broken, smashed before the fire. But theirs wasn't." He handed Anna a series of still images, a black SUV. 2 men, one holding what was unmistakably a gas can, and the driver, clean-shaven, tall, familiar. Ellie's voice dropped. "Dr. Rivers." Miller's jaw tightened. "We can't confirm motive yet, but it's under investigation. I'd advise you both to stay alert." Shadow, resting in the grass nearby, lifted his head at the name. He let out a soft huff, as if echoing the warning. Later that evening, while the house was quiet, Ellie gently opened her backpack and pulled out what she had salvaged. Burned edges, smoke-drenched pages, but still legible. Her father's notes, his thoughts, diagrams, even hand-drawn sketches of Shadow in early stages of training. Anna joined her on the floor, cross-legged like they used to be. "You could have died," she whispered. "I couldn't let Dad's work die too," Ellie replied. Shadow moved closer, head resting in Ellie's lap. His body trembled slightly, not from pain, but exhaustion. Ellie laid a hand gently on his neck. "He saved me, just like Dad trained him to." The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and soft fur. Shadow lay motionless on the cushioned table, a thin running from his foreleg to a fluid bag swinging gently above. His breathing was shallow but rhythmic, each inhale a small promise of fight left in him. Dr. Isaac Kimball, sleeves rolled to the elbows and spectacles perched low on his nose, hovered over Shadow's chart, his face grim but focused. Ellie stood close, eyes red-rimmed, hands gripping the strap of her backpack like it was a lifeline. Anna sat in the corner, flipping through a manila folder Dean Miller had dropped off that morning. Inside were documents that had turned everything they thought they knew upside down. Dr. Rivers had never represented the Belmont Canine Research Institute. The business card he left behind was an elaborate fake. Miller's contacts had traced his real identity: Dalton Rivers, former director of experimental pharmacological testing at Neuropet Labs, a controversial biotech facility in Oregon. The lab had been shut down 3 years prior following multiple ethical violations, including the use of live animals in unapproved neurological trials. What stunned them most, Shadow, codenamed NPL GSD-7, had been the only subject to survive a dangerous epilepsy suppression trial. The drug he had been exposed to caused heightened pre-ictal sensitivity, an ability to detect seizure patterns minutes before they occurred. But the side effects, nerve damage, sensory disorientation, and acute fatigue, had made the treatment too risky to pursue further. "He's not just a service dog," Dr. Kimball murmured. "He's a survivor of a failed experiment they were trying to bury." Anna's voice cracked. "So they wanted him back, not to help people, but to restart what they lost." Kimball nodded. "And if what Rivers said is true, Shadow's the only working result they ever had." Shadow let out a soft groan. Ellie stepped forward and gently rested her hand on his side. His fur was coarse under her fingers, patches still singed from the fire. "Will he make it?" she asked. Kimball hesitated. "He's stable, but barely." His body's working overtime to recover from smoke inhalation and old neural scarring. But there's something promising. He gestured toward a small machine next to the four. I've started him on a compound that was shelved 10 years ago. It's not experimental, just forgotten. Natural extract, originally designed to aid nerve regeneration in retired police dogs. If he responds, it might buy him more time. Maybe even help long term. Ellie nodded, lips tight. That afternoon, Sheriff Dean Miller returned with a flash drive. He pulled Ellie and Anna into Kimball's office and loaded a series of video files. What you're about to see was recovered from a whistleblower inside Neuropet before the shutdown, Miller explained. The screen showed grainy footage of a sterile lab. Rows of kennels lined the walls. In one corner, a young German shepherd sat alert. Even through the poor resolution, Ellie recognized the intense gaze. It was Shadow. A gloved hand reached into the kennel. Subject 7, a voice said. Dose 2.3 milligrams. Monitoring begins. In the following clips, Shadow could be seen responding to trainer's commands, but also freezing mid-movement, his eyes flicking erratically as if tracking something invisible. Miller stopped the footage. This was the last known video before the shutdown. Afterward, Shadow was dumped off record, mislabeled as an untrainable animal. That's how he ended up in the Pine Hollow auction. Anna looked down. They abandoned him after he survived their failures. Ellie stared at the screen. Not failures. They just couldn't see what he could still become. The next few days passed slowly. Shadow remained at the veterinary hospital under Kimball's watch. Ellie visited daily, reading her father's notes aloud beside him. She flipped through pages marked with circled keywords, early prototype diagrams, and sketches labeled with Shadow's serial code. Liam came too, sometimes bringing hand-drawn pictures or bits of poetry he'd scribbled in the margins of his schoolwork. One afternoon, while Ellie read from her dad's log, Liam placed a worn toy soldier beside Shadow's paw. He protected you, Liam whispered. Now we protect him. The community rallied. Flyers were posted warning about rivers. A local news segment aired a story titled, Maplewood Girl Saves Experimental Dog from Corporate Scandal. Donations poured in to support Shadow's recovery. Strangers brought flowers. Children mailed drawings of German shepherds in superhero capes. One letter arrived from Portland. Inside was a single sentence. They tried to silence the truth. But the truth has 4 paws and a name now. By the end of the week, Shadow began lifting his head again. His appetite returned slowly, and when Ellie entered the room, his tail thumped softly. Kimball smiled. He's stubborn. That's going to save him. That night, Ellie sat outside the clinic under a sky scattered with stars. She opened her journal and wrote one sentence. He was never an experiment. He was always a miracle waiting to be seen. Morning sun broke gently over Maplewood, brushing the rooftops with gold and melting the last bits of frost clinging to the grass. The town had taken on a kind of quiet joy lately, like it had exhaled after a long, tense breath. In the weeks since the fire and Shadow's slow recovery, things had begun to shift, subtly but meaningfully. Ellie stood outside the veterinary hospital, her hand resting on the top of Shadow's head. His gait was steadier now, though he still favored his right leg slightly. His coat had grown back over the singed patches, and his eyes, those deep, honey-dark eyes, held their usual watchfulness. She wasn't alone that morning. Anna stood nearby, dressed in a navy blouse and beige slacks, her auburn hair pulled back in a loose twist. Her posture was proud, but the kind of proud that comes with humility, the strength of someone who's weathered too much to take peace for granted. Next to her was a new figure, tall and lean, with wind-reddened cheeks and an expression that mixed warmth with quiet scrutiny. Her name was Cameron Blake, mid-40s, regional director of the North Star Canine Alliance. She wore an olive-green field jacket, boots well worn with dirt and use, and carried a leather binder tucked under her arm. Her eyes, a clear steel blue, studied both Shadow and Ellie with calm intensity. Cameron had arrived in town after seeing the local news coverage. She'd watched Ellie's interview 3 times and read the article where Dr. Kimball explained how a child and a broken dog had somehow created a new kind of therapy model, one grounded in trust, patience, and instinct. Cameron stepped forward now, crouching to Shadow's level. "You've got a fire in you, old boy," she murmured, then turned her gaze to Ellie. "And you've got something rare. Not just love, but vision." Ellie flushed, I just wanted to help. That's exactly how all good models begin, Cameron said, standing up. North Star specializes in pairing retired or unfit service dogs, dogs like Shadow, with children who have long-term challenges. Your structure is organic, intuitive. We'd like to help you grow it. Anna blinked. Grow it how? Cameron opened the binder. Inside were printed pages, diagrams, grant proposals, funding, trainers, a portable unit for weekly outreach. Your father's notes. We'd like to digitize and incorporate them. With your permission, Ellie, we want to build this out as a pilot program. The Shadow Project. Ellie's breath caught. You want to use what we did as a model? Not just use it, Cameron replied. We want you to lead it. The following weeks moved with beautiful chaos. The Maplewood Public Library cleared a back room and designated it as a reading and calming center where children could visit with dogs like Shadow. Ellie, guided by Cameron and Anna, trained with local volunteers, mostly teens who had grown up with pets or wanted to learn more about service dogs. One of them was Theo Grant, a lanky, soft-spoken high school sophomore with freckles across his nose and an uncanny ability to calm even the most nervous puppy. Theo had struggled with speech anxiety for most of his life, but found a strange confidence when working with animals. Ellie assigned him to help train a golden retriever named Luna, recently retired due to early arthritis. Another helper was Maya Torres, a bookish 12-year-old from Ellie's school who had a knack for organization and kept detailed charts of dog behavior and child progress. Her parents owned the town's cafe and had started offering a Shadow's Biscuit special every Saturday, proceeds going to the project fund. The school district got involved too. Principal Lorna Hayes, a sharp-eyed woman with cropped gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, had initially been skeptical. But after seeing how Liam's anxiety had transformed and how Trevor, an autistic first grader, had begun speaking full sentences while petting Shadow, she approved a partnership. Once a week, dogs visited classrooms during quiet hour, helping students decompress and focus. Cameron coordinated with a videographer from North Star to document the progress. The first short film aired online with the title, Healing Tales: How One Girl and One Dog Started a Movement. It went viral within 2 days. One afternoon, Ellie stood in the middle of a circle of folding chairs set up on the school's back lawn. Around her were 7 children and 3 dogs, Shadow, Luna, and a squat rescue mutt named Gus who drooled more than he barked. Ellie held a laminated cue card, helping Rosie, her Saturday student, practice commands. Shadow, ever watchful, remained by her side, but no longer needed to intervene. He had learned to guide by presence, not always action. Anna watched from the school steps, arms crossed, eyes glassy with pride. Dr. Kimball stood beside her, nodding thoughtfully. She's doing what her father always dreamed of, he said. She's doing even more, Anna replied. She's teaching them all how to listen. That night, Ellie sat on the porch, the binder Cameron had left now filled with notes, doodles, and names of new volunteers. Shadow lay at her feet, his head resting on the toe of her sneaker. The stars were just beginning to peek out, and the sound of laughter carried from the house next door. Liam and his sister chasing fireflies. I think we're really doing it, boy, she whispered. Shadow thumped his tail twice. And somewhere deep in the woods beyond, another spark of light flickered. Not fire, not danger, but possibility. The air in Maplewood that morning was crisp, tinged with the scent of pine and fresh-cut cedar. A crowd had begun to gather along the old gravel road that led to the newly built center, right where the Carter family's training barn had once stood before the fire. Now, in its place stood a long, low building with dark timber siding, wide bay windows, and a slate-gray roof that shimmered under the sunlight. Carved into the cedar above the entrance were the words, Carter and Shadow Training Center. The town had come out in full force. Parents in wool coats held warm drinks while their children tugged on mittens and pointed excitedly at the dogs romping in the grass behind the building. A white canopy shaded a small wooden stage near the front doors, where a microphone had been set up. Folding chairs filled the lawn, and beneath them, snow from last week's flurry still lingered in cool patches. Ellie stood just off stage, dressed in a navy dress with a tiny silver pin shaped like a paw on her collar. She was taller now, barely 13, but carried herself with a posture that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with courage earned. At her side was Shadow, his coat glossy again, his legs stronger, though a slight limp remained when he turned too quickly. A green vest embroidered with the words, "Lead with heart," rested over his shoulders. Anna stood nearby, her hands gently clasped together. Her face held a quiet, steady pride. Behind her were Dr. Kimball and Cameron Blake, both smiling as they greeted attendees and pointed out features of the center. Cameron wore a scarf the color of autumn leaves, and her weathered face lit up every time a child approached. The building itself had been funded through a blend of local donations, a North Star Development grant, and a generous anonymous contribution traced back, unmistakably, to one of the original Neuropet whistleblowers. What once had been a symbol of trauma had now become something new, a home for healing. The stage creaked slightly as Principal Hayes stepped forward. Her gray cropped hair peeked out from under a wool beret, and her voice, though naturally stern, softened as she addressed the crowd. When a community chooses to believe in its children, when it dares to rebuild instead of retreat, this is what happens, she said, gesturing behind her to the center. We stand on the ashes of pain today, not to remember the fire, but to honor what survived it. She paused, then turned toward Ellie. And now, it's time we hear from the girl who started it all. Ellie stepped forward. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded her notes. She cleared her throat, and the microphone caught her first breath. "I never thought I'd be standing here," she began, her voice quiet but growing stronger with every word. "When I found Shadow at the auction, I thought I was saving a dog. But I didn't know he was saving me too." She paused, reaching down to touch Shadow's head gently. "I lost my dad before I was ready," she continued, eyes scanning the crowd. "And for a long time, that just felt like a hole, like something broken inside me. But then I found his old notebooks, his words, his lessons, and this dog, who remembered more than I ever thought possible. Shadow showed me that healing isn't about going back. It's about going forward with scars." A hush fell over the crowd. Ellie lifted a hand to point at the cedar plaque now hanging near the entrance, a hand-carved wooden sign that had been stained and sealed against the weather. It read, "Not all scars mean endings. Some scars begin a mission." Ellie smiled. "That's what this place is for. To take the broken things, the forgotten ones, and remind them they're not done, that they still matter, that they can still lead. Just like Shadow, just like my dad." She stepped back, and for a beat, no one moved. Then the applause began, tentative at first, then swelling, rising, until it echoed through the trees like birdsong. After the ceremony, children were invited inside the center for an open house. Rooms had been painted in soft blues and greens, with murals of dogs and stars and children holding leashes. A large training ring took up the rear of the building, with padded flooring and gentle lighting. In another room, Maya had set up a digital archive of Mr. Carter's training protocols, now categorized and available for visiting trainers and volunteers. Theo led a demonstration in the outdoor agility yard, helping new volunteers practice basic hand commands. Liam, his anxiety now tempered into something manageable, guided a blindfolded boy through a trust course, with Shadow walking steadily between them. Later that afternoon, Ellie found herself on the center's wraparound porch, a mug of cocoa warming her hands. Shadow lay at her feet, content and still, nose twitching at the scent of the wind. Anna joined her, sliding into the chair beside her daughter. "He would have been proud," she said softly. "I think he already knew," Ellie replied, "that this is what he was building toward. He just didn't know who'd finish it." Anna smiled. "And you did." Ellie looked out over the property, the fenced fields, the happy chaos of kids and dogs, the slow rhythm of hope in motion. "No," she said. "We did. A miracle called faith in a world filled with loss, hurt, and forgotten dogs like Shadow. We sometimes forget that miracles can still sprout from the smallest things. A little girl who refuses to give up, a dog who no longer believes, and a community that chooses to love instead of turn away. Shadow is more than just a rescued dog. He is proof that God can use the weakest of creatures to create great healing. Through Ellie's hands, through perseverance, sacrifice, and unconditional love, God created a miracle not with thunder or great things, but with a look, a scar, and a wagging tail. In your daily life, you may also be holding a shadow, in your heart a pain, an unhealed thing, a person or animal that you want to bring into the light. Believe that nothing is too late, no one is too small, and no hurt is meaningless in God's eyes. If this story has touched your heart, please share it to spread faith and hope. Let those who are weary know that they are not alone. Comment Amen if you believe that God is still working silently through love. May God bless you and your family. Those who have listened, felt, and accompanied Ellie and Shadow's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that each next story will come to you as a gentle reminder. Miracles are still there, as long as we don't stop believing.